In this video, we're going to take a look at conditioning for the triple jump and with relevance to the long jump. I made a presentation recently and I looked at a number of ways in which you can improve your conditioning to the benefit of the triple jump. And there are a lot of options, and I decided to focus predominantly on plyometric jump orientated ones, and in doing so I added to my knowledge on a lot of specifics in the way that you can train using plyometrics and various combinations and types of jump exercises to improve the triple jump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the research and slides that I came up with in order to hopefully increase your understanding of how you can actually specifically use various training methods, jump orientated ones, to develop, improve specific triple jump power. And as I said, it will have a relevance to the long jump as well. So how do we develop power for the triple jump? Well, we've got a number of options available to us. So we've got plyometrics, including drop jumps and depth jumps. We've got complex and contrast training, weight training, triphasic training, technical training, overspeed and downhill methods. Now, I started to look into drop jumping, and as I've said in previous videos, the height of the drop can have a bearing on the type of strength that is developed. Now what we want is to be able to increase the leg stiffness of the triple jumper so that they can absorb and return energy more quickly. And the more I looked into it, the more the absorption, the eccentric capacity of the jumper becomes crucial. So this is from Verkhoshansky, who was the founder of the depth jump, drop jump methodology from the Soviet Union. And he's indicating that the maximum height that you should drop down from to develop speed would be 75 centimeters. And to develop strength, it will be 1.10 meters. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. But what I will say is, in my experience, younger jumpers and those that are not so physically adept will struggle with a 1.10 meter drop and reaction. So you've got to tailor your jumper's abilities to the height from which they drop down from. But drop jumps have and will always continue to be a vital element of triple jump conditioning. Now on that subject, Verkhoshansky did not believe that adding weight to a drop jump would improve its benefits. It will slow down the reactivity, the contact, the coefficient of reactivity. However, there is research that indicates that accelerated plyometrics can have benefits. Now I'll go into that a little bit later. Something else that's very important to bear in mind, as I've said, is the eccentric component of jumps training. Now, a top-class triple jumper has to absorb over 20 times potentially their body weight coming out of the hop and return that into the step phase. They need to have great braking capacity, and here the eccentric, isometric, muscular actions come into great play. Now, in terms of research, there's a lot now that's beginning to come to the fore which indicates that downhill plyometrics, for example, can improve the vertical velocity component of jumping, i.e. get the jumper to be able to return more force. So downhill plyometrics, for example, such as skipping drills, takeoff drills, are a good option. There's other research that indicates that jumping down steps continuously will also improve vertical component of jumping. This slide here looks at the way that the different muscles are affected when doing plyometric training, for example. And here the present study was designed to clarify the mechanical loading characteristics and the role of neuromuscular function in the triple jump. It's good research in that national level triple jumpers were utilised. Now, keeping it short, the largest ground reaction forces were observed in the step, 15.2 times body weight, whilst the highest peak pressures were recorded under the heel and forefoot. In addition, electromyograms of both legs suggested that mechanical loading places high demands on the neuromuscular system, as characterized by the high rate of activation in the pre-activity phase, followed by high eccentric activity. Thus, high activities of the gastrocnemius, vastus lateralis and hip extensor muscles seem to play an important role in preventing unnecessary yielding of the jumper during the braking phase. So we've got to look at the specific muscles that are involved when doing jump exercises and how that can relate to the actual event's performance itself. So as I say here on the left, conditioning the hip extensors, glutes, calves and hamstring muscles may be very important in controlling landing forces and then returning them, and the vastus lateralis. So you've got initially the muscles behind the leg. So you've got the hamstrings and glutes, and then you've got the calf muscles in terms of absorption ability. This is some research that looks into what it would take to break the world record for men, and it was produced by Quintec, who make various biomechanical aids. And do take a look at this particular slide in your own time, paying particular attention to the strength, power and reactive strength components, as you can work towards achieving some of the scores that are identified here with your jumpers, so that you can get a bearing, a bead on where they are. As you'll see on the left hand side of the slide, they do have excellent, above average, average, below average and poor in terms of the performance targets for the various components measured. Now, something else that's very crucial when developing power for long and triple jumpers is the use of potentiation, and a lot of the training methodologies can indirectly have a potentiating effect. So if you then were to follow up, for example, drop jumps with squats, weighted squats, then the likelihood is that the weighted squats will be enhanced, and vice versa if the exercises were the other way around. So a number of training methodologies rely on or based on the potentiating benefits as much as they are on the actual activities, exercises included. Now, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but it's important for you as an athlete or a coach to realize that you can get a better return from your training sessions by using potentiation. So utilizing complex and contrast training, for example, can elicit greater returns from fast twitch muscle fiber, and therefore over a long period of time the body, the neuromuscular system, will adapt to being able to apply and return greater amounts of force. So as I said, you've got to realize that it's not just the exercise that you select, but the way you put them together to create a potentiating benefit. Triphasic training, very similar, which involves your isometric, eccentric and concentric muscular actions, and as I've said in my other videos, is very much down to the work of Cal Dietz. Now, as he says here on this particular slide, all dynamic muscular action is triphasic. The entire point of the triphasic method is learning how to isometrically and eccentrically absorb energy before applying it to explosive dynamic movements. So again, we're looking back at this eccentric isometric complex and the way that the triple jumper needs to be able to absorb force, become stronger in that particular area in order that they can then move through the phases to greater effect. And I believe through research and through practical application that triphasic methods can play a big role in achieving that. This particular slide here talks about the benefits of French contrast training. Now, I'm not so much of a fan of that methodology. Basically, it uses the force-speed continuum with 4 particular types of exercise. Each one basically is faster than the next. Weights exercises through various 3 plyometric types of exercises, very fast movement ones at the end. I've found that that can put too much strain, stress on the actual jumper. It's neurally draining, so I'd much prefer to use complex contrast training and use plyometrics and other jump orientated exercises in a slightly more controlled manner, and also on a high dosage basis. I don't think it's necessary to phase in your plyometrics, faster plyometrics, for example, as the season approaches, and slower, longer contact ones potentially at the beginning of the season. Yes, there will be a degree of periodization of your plyometrics, but for me, it's better to work at the higher end of the force speed continuum all year round. And that way you're getting that heightened neuromuscular and physiological response being built step upon step upon step across the whole year. Now, something that I found to be of very great interest was the use of assisted plyometrics. The jumper's body weight is reduced by the use of elastic harnesses, and the contact is thus reduced. The eccentric portion and the stretch shortening cycle is increased in its speed, and the Optimum levels for those types of drills, I believe, has yet to be ascertained. However, research does indicate that it can be beneficial. Here's some research that looks at volleyball players, and the volleyball players performed assisted plyometric training and some didn't, and those that did improve their ability to jump vertically, what I think a counter movement jump, and also more sports specifically to spike, as in volleyball. So incorporating some form of assisted plyometric training in your jumpers' workouts may again improve their ability to return force and generate greater vertical velocity. Concluding here with, if the purpose of assisted jumping is to spend less time on the ground without decreasing force, systems with finite adjustments and longer bands should be used. However, shorter bands, now that's maybe hooking two bands or a band around a pull-up bar and holding it in various positions as you jump up and down, may also be used. But the research does say that due to the larger variability of assistance throughout the range of motion, such systems may alter the neuromuscular characteristic of the jump in other ways that should be investigated in future research. I will say, from what I found out, and in particular from the work of Nelly Omura, I think it's something that's very well worth exploring and incorporating into your jumpers training. The more I look into it and the more I study things, after a certain point, I think the ability to generate greater vertical velocity, i.e. withstand forces on impact, will improve the triple jumper. They will be able to more naturally absorb and return force. Now, leg stiffness, as I've mentioned, is crucial to all jumpers. Being able to return energy without yielding too much through that amortization phase between the stretch and the reflex is crucial. Now, this particular research here looks at how through EMG activity the muscles of the legs can be pre-activated or are pre-activated, and also what type of muscles are involved. Now, I've talked about that previously, but drop jumps in particular can create better pre-activation. So that's a great rationale for incorporating them in your training. So the more you include that type of training in your jumpers training, the better their pre-activation and force return is going to be. Reading a little bit here, it's talking about the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle, and the soleus as well, and how there was significantly high EMG activity in the vastus medialis, thigh muscles, and lateralis, was already shown in the flight phase prior to the feet making contact with the ground. So that's your pre-activation. The more that you train, perhaps with drop jumps, for example, and potentially with assisted plyometrics, the greater that pre-activation, that pulling back the pin before the contact and the firing from the ground. Finally, we just look at some research that looks specifically at triple jumps and individualization, and how different styles of triple jumping, whether you're using a Russian or a Polish technique, for example, a higher trajectory orientated one or a flatter trajectory one, and the length of the hop and whether the jumper is hop dominated or jump dominated, will have an effect on the type of training that can be utilized. Saying, conclusions, the results demonstrate that hop dominated and balanced jumpers enhanced each dominated jump displacement using different swing and stance leg motions. And they're saying that that information may help coaches produce better training programs that reflect more specifically how their actual jumpers respond. So I hope the information that I've provided in this overview of jumps conditioning from a jumping perspective will give you some insights into how you can utilize these methods for your own jumpers. As usual, thanks for being Coach Athlete channel members and supporting what I do on this channel. If you've any specific questions, then do drop me a line or leave a comment in the section below.